Hello, my name is Brandon Hickey, and this is my career presentation. After I graduate, the first step is to take about a year off and work on my applications for grad school. I hope to get into an MFA program for creative writing and get my master's degree, and hopefully go on to have some sort of career in creative writing, whether that be fiction writing, being a novelist, or something like that. Obviously, unless you're very lucky, solely a career in creative writing is a very difficult thing to ob- obtain. So I hope to both use my current psychology degree as well as my writing skills to have some sort of career utilizing writing, whether it be journalism, technical writing, or anything else like that. That is my plan going forward, and up until recently, that hadn't always been the plan. Up until recently, I had planned to go on to get my master's in psychology and clinical psychology, and to go on and get my PsyD in psychology as well, and to eventually become a child psychologist dealing with ADHD. That had always been the plan ever since I was a high schooler. But recently, things have changed, and that change began happening with the COVID 19 pandemic. I'm sure I don't really need to go into details about what that pandemic was like, since I'm sure all of you experienced it just as I did. But for me in particular, I spent a lot of time in at home because of it. My both my parents were high risk, and because of that, most of my days were spent in the same few rooms, 17 months worth of it, and I began to go into very dark places. I began to think about death, and I began to think a lot about life and what I wanted from it. And it became increasingly clear that psychology and a career in psychology wasn't really what I was looking for. And I earlier in this year, as I started thinking about my career because of this class, I visited my psychology advisor, and I'm a little ashamed to admit it for the first time. And we talked about my career aspirations, and she suggested that instead of a instead of a master's degree in clinical psychology, I would be better suited to go into a master's degree for social work or mental health counseling. And that was because I would be able to practice psychology straight out of those master's programs, whereas with a master's in psychology, I would have to wait to get my PsyD to practice. And I thought that would be a better path for me. Now, I still plan to get my PsyD eventually, but I changed the master's program I wanted to go with first. And the changes didn't stop there, obviously. As I continued to think about what going into psychology would mean and the kind of things I would do for it, I began to realize that they weren't really what I wanted. I began to realize that what I like about psychology was more the academics, the theory of it, different concepts, and not really the down and dirty, everyday procedures of psychology, whether that be research or whether that be clinical psychology. I didn't really see that future for me. I realized that something like writing was something I liked a lot more, and I have a minor in creative writing, and it was in those creative writing classes that I'd taken this semester that that love of writing started to be fostered more. And it was with my obsession with my admission into the Etchings Journal, our literary magazine here, with from one of my short stories, that I really cemented the idea that I wanted to go in for creative writing. So my I changed my goals and decided that a career in writing was the best place. And that means that after I graduate, I'm going into an MFA in creative writing rather than a master's in social work or mental health like I had planned. And this has been a really big change in my life, a really big change in trajectory, because, like I said, I had always planned on going further into psychology. So it's taken a lot of getting used to, and I've started to figure out my path through this. And now, of course, I'm relatively new in this new career field, and while I felt like I had a lot planned out for psychology, it feels like I have relatively little planned out. So I'm still taking those steps to figure out what's next for me in this new field of writing. And I know that number one, the first path is taking a year off. Because of that year in COVID, it seemed like my senior year really snuck up on me, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. But it felt like I was just a sophomore, and now suddenly I'm a senior about to graduate. So I wanted to take that semester off to to touch back with where I am in time and kind of take more time to figure things out. Working on my creative writing, working on a short story for my submission, working on stuff like my cover letter and my personal statement, not my personal statement and my CV for grad school. And hopefully I will get into an MFA program. Now that's a tall order. You might not know this, but an MFA in creative writing is one of the most selective and exclusive programs in the country. Med school has an acceptance rate of about 7%, and MFA has an acceptance rate of about 4%. For instance, in Indiana, only about 32 students statewide are admitted into their creative writing programs. So obviously, a very big step, and it might take more than a year. It might take several years to get into my program, and ultimately, I have to face the fact that I might never get in, and that will require realigning my prospects once again. But right here, right now, I'm looking towards that MFA in creative